In tonight's news edition, during talks with Yemen's Prime Minister, His Majesty the King says a political solution in Syria is the guarantee of ending violence and bloodshed. The lower house says Israeli air raids against Syria are a violation of a sovereign Arab country, while China and Russia warn of a wider conflict. And Israel criticizes Google's decision to put the name Palestine under the banner of its search page for the Palestinian territories. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King met with Yemeni Prime Minister Mohammed Basindwa, who conveyed to the King the greetings of Yemeni President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi. They discussed during the meeting, attended by Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour, ways of further cementing Jordanian-Yemeni ties, developments in Syria, as well as efforts to achieve peace in the region. The King said arriving at a transitional political solution in Syria is the only guarantee to end violence and bloodshed while preserving the unity of Syria and the safety of its people. His Majesty also spoke about the increasing burden Jordan is shouldering due to the growing numbers of Syrian refugees in the kingdom, which currently stands at some 500,000. The Yemeni Prime Minister thanked Jordan for supporting and empowering Yemeni institutions after the revolution. Foreign Minister Nasser Juri discussed with senior advisor to Turkish President Arshad Hormuzlu Jordanian-Turkish ties and the latest developments in the Middle East, particularly the Syrian crisis and the plight of refugees. The two officials underlined the importance of boosting economic cooperation, increasing Turkish investments in the kingdom, and improving tourism and cultural cooperation. Judy briefed Hormuzlu on the fallout of the Syrian crisis on Jordan, where hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees receive basic services despite the kingdom's economic hardship. Lower House Speaker Saad Hail Sroor said Amman and Ankara maintained deep, historic and constantly developing ties, particularly in the parliamentary field. Sroor gave a briefing on Jordan's reforms and the burdens on the kingdom's economy due to the political turmoil in the region. The lower house expressed its deep concern after Israeli jets struck targets in Syria, calling the raids a vicious aggression. It condemned the blatant aggression against and dangerous violation of a sovereign sister Arab country. In a statement, the House warned that the Israeli attacks would further complicate the already escalating situation in Syria and expose the entire region to further chaos, insecurity and instability. The attacks, it said, were a gross violation of international laws and conventions, urging the world community to assume its responsibility and stand up to Israel to put an end to recurrent violations of Syrian territory. The House urged Arab states to act promptly to end the Israeli aggression. Lebanon has called on the UN Security Council to condemn violations of its airspace by Israel. It came a day after Israel carried out raids in Syria to target what it said were Iranian missiles bound for Hezbollah group. Russia and China expressed alarm over the regional repercussions of two Israeli air raids on Syria, while Israel went on alert. The latest escalation sent oil prices rising above $105 a barrel, the highest in nearly a month. Luaib Al-Qar has more.
The prospect of a broader conflict grew in the wake of Israeli airstrikes on Syrian military targets. This is the aftermath of the Israeli airstrikes on military installations, including Iranian-supplied missiles stored near the capital. President Bashar al-Assad called the attack a declaration of war and threatened unspecified retaliation. Israel has vowed it will not let high-tech weaponry get to Hezbollah. Syrian opposition groups in Syria condemned the airstrikes and called on all foreign fighters to leave Syria to enable the start of the peace process.
We call on the international community to prevent the Israeli enemy from using the internal situation in Syria to accomplish its goals.
Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman said Moscow is concerned about the rising threat of military intervention in the conflict.
We are also clarifying and analyzing all of the circumstances connected to the reports of Israeli airstrikes on Damascus, which caused particular alarm. The further escalation of armed confrontation sharply increases the risk of creating new areas of tension.
Amid tension along its northern border following the strikes, Israel beefed up its rocket defenses to shield against any possible retaliation as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was visiting China. Beijing issued veiled criticism of Israel, urging restraint and respecting Syria's sovereignty. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said he understands Israel's strikes on Syria, but warned the conflict could move beyond its borders and urged for a political solution in Syria.
Israel has said that if weapons were to be given to Hezbollah, they will react. Obviously, it's both something that one can understand, and at the same time, it's a risk because if the situation and the conflict extends itself to the surrounding countries, the nature of the conflict can be changed.
Another issue in the conflict was the use of chemical weapons. UN investigator Carla Del Ponte said there are strong suspicions that Syrian rebels have used banned sarin nerve gas in the conflict. The Syrian National Council said any opposition member suspected of using chemical weapons will be brought to justice, but it accused the regime's intelligence agents of spreading false information to prevent international investigators to enter Syria. Violence, meanwhile, persisted across Syria, with government jets attacking rebel forces. In Homs, airstrikes killed many people and destroyed several buildings, including a mosque. Damascus was also under airstrikes that destroyed Jubar district. In Deir al-Zur, rebels, they said they shot down a helicopter, killing 6 soldiers on board. 5 million people have fled their homes, including 1.4 million refugees in nearby countries, and the conflict continues. Loïb Alqar for the news at 10.
Amid fears of a spillover of violence and of the fallout of any chemical weapons use in Syria, the Turkish military launched a 10-day exercise at a base near the border with Syria. The Turkish military said the exercise at Incirlik, a NATO air base outside the city of Adana, where US troops are also stationed, will test the military's readiness for battle and the coordination with government agencies. While the exercise in Adana province, some 100 kilometers from the border, was described by NATO's second biggest military as planned, it comes at a time of heightened tension. Turkey is sheltering nearly 400,000 refugees from Syria. Chinese President Xi Jinping said the Palestine cause is the core of the Middle East issue. He said during talks with visiting Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas that Beijing firmly supports the just cause of the Palestinian people. Xi's talks with Abbas were his first with a head of state from the Middle East after he assumed the Chinese presidency in March. Xi said, so long as the legitimate national rights and interests of the Palestinian people cannot be restored, peace between Palestine and Israel would not be realized. The Palestinian issue, he stressed, should not be neglected at any time, adding that Chinese people's support to Palestinian people is sincere and hearty. The Palestinian president said Palestine wants to address the issue through peaceful talks on the basis of the two-state solution. He urged Israel to observe international pacts and halt settlement building so as to create conditions for resumption of the peace talks. Abbas also met Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. China will also host Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this week for separate bilateral talks as it tries to shore up its role in the region. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said it supported the peace process in the Middle East and would provide assistance if the two leaders want to meet in China.
China has consistently supported the peace process in the Middle East. We support Palestine and Israel to resolve their differences and disputes through peaceful talks. China's hosting of state visits by leaders by the two countries is part of our efforts to promote the peace process in the Middle East.
Palestinians welcomed Google's decision to put the name Palestine under the banner of its search page for the Palestinian territories, www.google.ps. Palestinians called Google's move a virtual victory, but Israel dismissed it as intervention in politics. A Google spokesman explained that the company based its decision on UN resolutions and other international organizations. We get more in this report.
Google gives Palestine a virtual victory on its long path to statehood. On May 1st, the popular search engine removed the word territories from its search page, simply referring to the 3 Palestinian enclaves as Palestine. Palestinians have welcomed the move, with Sabri Saidem, the advisor to President Mahmoud Abbas, saying the designation gives Palestine a geographical presence. Israeli officials were less enthusiastic and asked why Google was treading in politically controversial waters.
Google can do anything they want. They can do Google Never Neverland if they want to, and that's cool. However, one cannot but wonder, why does a private internet company want to get involved in international politics and in international diplomacy, and which is more to do that on the controversial side.
Palestinians have been fighting to be recognized as a state by foreign powers since peace talks with Israel stalled in 2011. The West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip were seized by Israel during the 1967 war and have been occupied since. In November, the United Nations approved its status as a non-member state, infuriating Israel.
Malaysia's ruling coalition wins elections and street protests grip Bangladeshi capital. But after this break, stay tuned.
عن جد مع الغد الكل ربحان. اشترك أو جدد اشتراكك لمدة عامين لتحصل وتربح العديد من الجوائز.
Welcome back. Malaysia's incumbent Prime Minister Najib Razak was sworn in after his coalition won the country's general elections. But the coalition recorded its worst ever election performance. These results may finish the political future of opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, who said he will step down if voters fail to dislodge the government. Hibal Atoum has this story.
Malaysia's incumbent Prime Minister faces a limited future after the worst electoral showing. Najib Razak took the oath after his coalition extended its 56-year rule but recorded its worst ever election performance. The British-trained economist was sworn in front of King Sultan Abdul Halim at the National Palace, followed by prayers in the Muslim nation. However, Najib may have to step down by the end of the year, according to ruling party sources. The Malaysian Prime Minister has hoped to strengthen the ruling coalition's majority in Parliament in the election on the back of a robust economy, reforms, and $2.6 billion of social handouts to poor families. But he was left vulnerable to party dissidents after his coalition won only 133 seats in the 222-member parliament, 7 short of its tally in 2008 and well below the 2/3 majority it was aiming for. Former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, still a powerful figure, said Najib must improve on the 140 seats won in 2008 or his position would be unstable. Opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim's People's Alliance won 89 seats, up 7 from the 2008 election.
To some level, some disappointment, but we are still hopeful I think there's already like a wave of change going on among the people. So I don't think that's going to stop.
The new government does have a credibility deficit at the very moment due to the very tenacious and contentious election process. I think they have to redouble their efforts in rebuilding their trust among the people.
While support for the ruling coalition from majority ethnic Malays remained solid, ethnic Chinese, who make up a quarter of Malaysians, continued to desert the National Front, accelerating a trend seen in the previous election. Ethnic Chinese have turned to the opposition, attracted by its pledge to tackle corruption and end race-based policies. Hiba Al-Atoum for the News at 10.
Libya's parliament voted to ban from government officials who served during the Gaddafi era. The move could unseat the prime minister and other top officials, regardless of their part in toppling the dictator. Politicians debated the draft law for months, but the issue surfaced this week when heavily armed groups took control of 2 ministries and stormed other institutions, including the state broadcaster. Prime Minister Ali Zaidan, a diplomat under Muammar Gaddafi who defected to the exiled opposition in 1980, could be among those barred from office. But this remains unclear. Congress members say the law could be applied to around 40 others in the parliament, including the President of the Assembly, Mohammed Magharif. Hundreds of people filled Tripoli's main square to celebrate the passage of the law, many of them shooting guns into the air. Clashes raged in the Bangladeshi capital Dhaka for a second day after a bloody crackdown by police on Islamist supporters the previous day. They regrouped today and threw stones at police, who responded by firing tear gas, rubber bullets and water cannon to disperse them. The demonstrators set fire to vehicles, including 2 police cars, and stormed a police post on the outskirts of the capital. Up to 7 people were confirmed to have been killed in today's clashes, 2 of them policemen and 1 a member of a parliamentary force. 4 people were killed and hundreds injured yesterday. The protests are led by an Islamist group which set the government a May 5th deadline to introduce a new blasphemy law. The government has rejected the demands. The clash of ideologies could plunge Bangladesh into a new cycle of violence. One of a group of high-rise Glasgow tower blocks has been demolished as part of a project to regenerate the Scottish city. The 30-story tower was the highest in Europe when it was built in the 1960s and was part of the Red Road flats. Although the tower blocks were built to house almost 5,000 people, only a few hundred remained living in the Red Road flats. Current and former residents gathered to witness the demolition, the second in a series which will see all 8 blocks blown down in the next 4 years. Buenos Aires witnessed the Super Clasico match between Boca Juniors and River Plate that ended with a 1-1 draw. River made an instant impact as Manuel Lanzini headed into the net after only 42 seconds for the fastest ever goal scored in the derby between Argentina's 2 biggest clubs. Boca's Santiago Silva leveled the score in the 39th minute. After the referee sent off River coach Ramon Diaz in the second half, chaos was ignited between the 2 sets of fans who dangerously climbed on high fences. The 1-1 draw left River Plate third on the table with 22 points, while Boca languish in 18th place in only 10 points. And to Britain, 273 competitors lined up on the bed of the River Crouch at low tide and raced 400 meters towards Malden town. They crossed the smelly, cold and wet route as they stampeded across the Blackwater River waist deep in thick black mud. The Malden Mud Race has established itself as a tough but fun event, but has always had the serious aim of raising important funds for local charities. The winner was John Edgington, who romped home in a new race record of 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Now let's what the weather has in store. A pleasant night tonight with possible local showers in the east, while winds will be northwesterly moderate. Hot conditions persist tomorrow with some thundery rain in the forecast, especially in the eastern desert region. Winds will be northwesterly brisk in the afternoon hours, blowing dust in the Badia. Aqaba should expect a mild night and hot day tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and calm seas. The weatherman warns of poor visibility in the Badia due to dust. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To close, here's a reminder of our top stories. During talks with Yemen's Prime Minister, His Majesty the King says a political solution in Syria is the guarantee of ending violence and bloodshed. The lower house says Israeli air raids against Syria are a violation of a sovereign Arab state, while China and Russia warn of a wider conflict. And Israel criticizes Google's decision to put the name Palestine under the banner of its search page for the Palestinian territories. And with this we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Rad Latouche. Thanks for watching and have a good night.